land of spiritual wisdom, temples, saints, and sages.
Oh, I love you, my dear India.
Today, most people in the West have experienced India's blessings through yoga classes, meditation, kirtan chanting, and more. But in the early 1900s, few Americans knew anything about yoga or India's spiritual wisdom. Beyond Swami Vivekananda's famous lecture at the opening of Chicago's Parliament of the World's Religions in 1893,
I have to thank you of America for the great attempt you're making to break down the barriers of this little world of ours, and hope that in the future the Lord will help you to accomplish your purpose.
even up to 1950, most Americans had never met anyone from India. Although some of the greatest Western philosophers, scientists, and writers had discovered and incorporated India's brilliance into their own works that had greatly blessed the West. In 1920 and 21, two very special young men from India came to the US to share their wisdom and blessings. One, Paramahansa Yogananda, would become world famous.
For God can revive the past in the present and the present in the future. There is no time nor space. Everything is happening in your own thought.
The other's works were covered by the sands of time until now. Maneck Anklesaria, known as Maneck of India, philosopher, metaphysician, storyteller, and teacher of practical and esoteric wisdom for a happy, healthy, and successful life. As a teen and young man, Maneck worked with Mohandas Gandhi for India's independence. Gandhi personally told young Maneck to get an education, telling him not to even open his mouth to lecture until he had completed his studies. After studying at several American universities, Maneck spoke widely for the next 4 decades, lecturing on Indian philosophy, spirituality, and metaphysics. 40 years after Vivekananda's famous Chicago lecture, Maneck would give his own lecture at the 1933 Chicago World's Fair's World Fellowship of Faiths. In the late 1920s, a wave of books and movies presented unbalanced and often inaccurate depictions that turned India's most troubling social circumstances into salacious tabloid fare. Gandhi called one of these books a drain inspector's report, and Maneck worked hard to preserve India's reputation in the West, heading pro-India organizations and hosting events to help make the case for India's independence from British rule. India's exotic and enticing color, combined with shocking tabloid exploitations, brought forth movies like 1933's India Speaks, which painted India as a land of 10,000 sins, where white girls are sacrificed to Buddha and 5 million vampire bats spread terror. With his usual sharp eloquence, Maneck stood up to defend India and gave lectures titled Maneck of India Speaks.
The unabashed distortion of fact in Hollywood's jumbled films constitutes, in this case, a breach of international etiquette, says Dr. Maneck. And I do not hesitate to say that I, as a Hindu, consider the continual abuse of India in America as bordering on an international insult.
Maneck and Paramahansa Yogananda shared a fellowship over the years and spoke together on occasion, with a mutual respect that inspired Yogananda to include a photo of Maneck lecturing in the first edition of the spiritual classic Autobiography of a Yogi. Maneck was also a friend of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. Before the Beatles made the Maharishi and Indian spirituality world famous. Even as Indian gurus made their way to the West, Maneck did not set himself up as a guru with disciples, but as a teacher whose mission was to share this wisdom with students around the world. Often with free lectures that didn't generate the kind of press some gurus of the time received, including some who pretended to be gurus and even pretended to be Indian. When Maneck's dear friend, Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, visited the United States in 1961,
Peace is a passion.
Maneck and his wife Dorothy were there to greet and spend time with Nehru during his visit to Los Angeles. In the late 1950s, Maneck acquired a large reel-to-reel player on which he recorded 40 tapes over the next several years.
Remember that natural law is gradual in our being, evolving, changing in human consciousness, evolving. And as you evolve in your mind, as you build new structure of thought in your mind, new ideals, new visions, new discoveries, and new self-discoveries will come to you, because you are no longer a closed focus camera. Your lens are wide open to take any picture that comes before the mirror of your mind. As your knowledge increases, the law of your possibility changes and increases. And so the new vistas begin to open. And that becomes your natural law. That becomes your new natural law. And all of you have got your own individual natural laws. Your mind's development, your mind's evolution, your mind's creation.
These tapes are a treasure house of spiritual knowledge and wisdom, with wonderful stories and Maneck's lovely humor.
And make your mind blank for 10, 15 or 30 seconds. Most of us have our brain blank most of the time anyway. Now this is the time when you can do it with benefit.
Maneck passed away in the late 1960s, before finding an avenue to share these tapes. His wife Dorothy contacted Warner Brothers Records to see if they would publish them as audio albums, but to no avail. For nearly 50 years, the tapes sat silent in an attic, until they were digitized by a resident who had been renting one of Maneck's old homes for many years. During which she wrote many spiritual books and recorded CDs and videos of India's music and wisdom. Janice found Maneck's lectures to be some of the very best she'd ever heard, and, after playing them regularly for her own spiritual nourishment, was inspired to produce this short film and help make these precious lectures available to our world at this important time. Funding is needed for all steps of the process, from transcribing over 40 hours of tapes to curating, cataloging, editing, and producing the first book and audiobook of Maneck's Wisdom Gems, with more to follow. Please visit maneckofindia.com for more information and to donate and help bring this great treasure of spiritual, metaphysical, and life wisdom to our world.
Shanti.